out there who are uncertain as to whether the heads of households who provide such great opportunities for those people coming under them have the opportunity for good-paying jobs. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I want to thank the Senator from Tennessee for his comments and for the way that he delves into any issue that we work on and comes up with some unique ideas from his past business experience. And I hope people will look at his resume, the information in his biography, to see the fantastic things that he's done that show that he has the capability to solve problems like this. And I particularly appreciate the solution that you've come up with. Some people say that it doesn't go far enough. You could make it go further than that, but it's timing that's important and actually getting a debate that's important. And I appreciate the way that you put it out in a reasonable way that we ought to be able to do it. And we need to do it right now so we don't keep passing this debt on down, so that we get in a responsible position. I'm going to talk about something very similar today. We're in a jobs crisis in this country. I came to the floor this afternoon to talk about jobs, and there isn't any more important issue for American families today than jobs. For 3 long years, we've been waiting for the economy to get back in gear and start creating the jobs necessary to keep America strong. I'm afraid that Congress and this administration have not done their part to foster the healthy, job-creating economy we need. We've heard plenty of talk about job creation, but the rhetoric simply does not match up with any action. So today I'll speak about the headwinds that we face as well as some of the simple solutions to help spur job creation. This week, the President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness presented President Obama with 5 steps to create job growth. I agree with most of the suggestions. Some of them are steps that I've been urging for some time, like streamlining job training programs and speeding up the government permitting processes. But unfortunately, for the most part, these are just baby steps. The truth is, the most significant step the federal government could take to allow greater job growth is even easier than a baby step. Washington government just needs to get out of the way. We keep putting up roadblocks. Last month's dismal job numbers paint a very clear picture. Unemployment rose to 9.1%, far above the 8% level promised by the administration at the time of the passage of the stimulus bill. Nearly 14 million Americans remain unemployed and actively looking for work, and more than half of them are long-term unemployed. With only 54,000 jobs created last month and 3 million job openings, the problem is clear. Now, these numbers also reveal some solutions that could go into effect if government would step out of the way. For example, 7,000 of the jobs created last month were in the mining industry. Those of us from mining states know that mining and domestic energy production industries offer good jobs with good pay and good benefits. Yet the administration has made it incredibly difficult for this industry to continue creating jobs. It's slowed the permitting process for the extension of existing mine plans, let alone new mining and drilling activities. Let me say that. It has slowed the permitting process to a crawl and directed EPA to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. Now, simply stated, the President's policies are making things worse. Now, how bad is this permitting process? 13 different mines have asked for an extension so that their mine plan could continue in a logical way. A big announcement 6 weeks ago. The administration is going to allow 798 tons of coal to come up for bid. That's 2 of 13 applications. 798 tons. In my county alone, there's 1 million tons of coal shipped a day. 1 million tons a day. The amount permitted for bid is a 2-year supply. And it's going to take 6 years to permit it. And we can't get the other 11 of them to be put out for bid and to go through that same delayed process. That's causing jobs. And it's also causing resources to be left in the ground that could be effectively used in our economy, which raises the costs. Now, the broadest result of this misguided energy policy will be increased prices for Americans. I guess that's what we have. And it will only dig our economic hole deeper. American families are already coping with a terrible job market and a struggling housing market. Increasing reliance on foreign energy sources and ignoring the sources we could harvest here at home makes no sense. In certain regions of the country, the result of this misguided energy policy is lost jobs and bankrupted American companies. On the Gulf Coast, many of the thousands of jobs that were supported by the offshore drilling industry are simply gone due to the moratorium, to the permit, and to bureaucratic delays on offshore drilling in the Gulf. Also, trained people. When trained people are out of a job, they need a job, they go somewhere else to get a job. They go to other countries to get a job. It reduces the number of people who can do the work here. It's another way of sending jobs overseas. Some of the production has moved to Brazil and other countries that are not impeding their domestic energy production. And we're their customers. We're the ones buying it at extra high prices. Ironically, one of the largest discoveries of oil in the Gulf of Mexico was just announced last week. This discovery proves that there are still massive amounts of domestic energy available to help alleviate the higher prices if the government would simply get out of the way. Unfortunately, the slowdown in exploratory drilling as a result of last year's moratorium is expected to lead to a 20% production decline this year. And things don't happen overnight. Permitting in that takes up to 6 years as well. And I don't know if we're aware, but there's a Middle East cartel that helps set the price of gas. Now, years ago, they used to be able to do that much easier. They could cut back the supply and increase the cost, or they could increase the supply and decrease the cost. Twice I watched them get the price of a barrel of oil down to $8 and put the American oil industry out of business. And they just put it out of business long enough that the people that were qualified to do the work got jobs other places. When they brought it back, it took years for us to bring the production back up. Now, they've said that Saudi Arabia has run out of energy, that they're just about to use up their supplies. Well, last week they announced that they're going to have this huge increase in production. How'd that happen? Well, there are new techniques. There are new technologies that are being used on drilling, and it's helping to bring up more oil. We ought to be doing that right here in the United States. We ought to be increasing our supply of oil. There are fields where only 20% of the oil was producible at the time that they were drilled. New technologies, one of which is to put carbon dioxide, CO2, down the hole and force the oil up. That's good for another 10 or 20% of the oil. And it captures the carbon. Aren't we talking about capturing carbon? We ought to be encouraging that, not discouraging that. We also have a company that would like to convert low sulfur, no sulfur coal to diesel fuel. No sulfur diesel. It's one of the things that we really want. Now, with these fluctuations in prices that we've seen over the years, they said, we've got the money to build this $2 billion plant and to get it to operate. But what happens if Saudi Arabia and the Middle East cartel decide to drive the price down again? What if that price got down to $50 a barrel and made our production unproductive? If they put us out of business, if they bankrupted us? Well, Congress several years ago said, we can take care of that. We're going to do loan guarantees. We'll provide loan guarantees for you. We're not going to give you the money, but if that price were to fall below the $50 a barrel, then we would have some responsibility in the situation. Of course, the chances of it ever going to $50 a barrel are pretty negligible. But we allocated, I think, about $4.8 billion to put loan guarantees, that's no cost to the federal government, out there for this company to go ahead and make low sulfur diesel and even jet fuel. Our military needs jet fuel. But out of that $4.8 million, none of it's been allocated. None of it. Now, at the same time, we did grants for solar and wind in the amount of $54 billion. Which do you think can produce the most energy? A loan guarantee that costs nothing, or a cost of $54 billion at a time when we don't have money? But it's okay with me that we have the solar and the wind. I think it's a good idea, and we're developing a lot of that in Wyoming, too. But how come we can't turn loose of a loan guarantee so that we can change coal into diesel with carbon sequestration? It's because there's just this adverse opinion on coal. It creates a lot of problems. So it isn't just a problem in that area. This slowing down of the processes is also affecting things like medical devices. We're interested in the health care of the American people. And we have an agency that watches out for our safety and should watch out for our safety. And we help ensure that time after time. We did a food safety bill, which is a part of that FDA plan. But in 2003, it was obvious to the companies that make the medical devices that the agency didn't have enough people, enough resources to expedite, to get their evaluation done in a timely manner. And the industry agreed to put up money, not to have any benefit to their particular one, but for the whole industry to get things streamlined with more people looking at it so that they could get the approval, so they could get these health devices out to people so that they could be used. Well, since 2003, when they put in the first amount, the resources for that department have doubled, and the fees have tripled, and the production has been cut in half. It's taken too long on the processes. Now, how do I gauge too long on the processes? Well, Europe does the safety process too. Europe approves these medical devices 2 years before we do. 2 years before people in the United States are able to use these things, they're using them in Europe. And you're not hearing about any calamities with the medical devices in Europe. They're doing an adequate job of checking the safety and making sure that what they're putting out produces the desired result. But not in the United States. We're slowing that process down, putting more money in, slowing the process down. There are things out there that people could really use. Before I came here, I had a heart valve tear. And they have to, at that time, they had to do open heart surgery and go in and stitch it up, put a special ring on there, which fortunately for me has held real well and repaired my heart, and it's in as good or better shape than it was before that time. But there's a medical device that now they could come in just like they go in with a stent, put that into that part on the heart, pop this little umbrella open, and I'd be fixed. Wouldn't have to have that invasive heart surgery. That's already been available in Europe for 2 years. It still hasn't been approved in this country. That's a process that's bogged down, that's causing jobs. So what do the companies do about it? They say, well, let's see. Why don't we build our stuff over in Europe? Now, if you build a plant, you're probably looking at 10, 20, 30 years of production before you're in a position to move that plant somewhere else, like back to the United States, should we cure a problem. So we've got to cure that problem now before we drive all of that overseas and all of those jobs overseas. The people who do the manufacturing on those things get good pay. They have skilled jobs. But they do them in the country where the plant is. They don't do them in the United States then. Just one more example. Well, I've got another one. Right now, they're in the process of doing a rule and regulation about how long you can drive a truck, how long you can idle a truck, how long you, what kind of medical inspection of the drivers you have to have. And one of the groups that brought that to my attention are the owner-operators of trucking companies. And they say that the people that are making this rule haven't driven a truck And that's one of the problems with a lot of these rules and regulations that we're having. The people that are making the rules have never done it. And there's this tendency in government to be afraid that at some point something might go wrong and it might come back. They've never had anybody come back on them for saying no or for slowing something down. Actually, they've never had anybody come back on them for saying yes. I wish they'd realize that. The outfit with the liability in this thing is the company, not the one that approves the process. And they just need a good process that they can move through, and we can have a lot more jobs in this country. Now, another way we can assist the jobs, as I've been saying, is by simply getting out of the way and by reducing the regulatory burden that the federal government places on employers. The first step here would be to repeal the health care law that's already driving up costs and paralyzing employers who are uncertain of their future obligations. Unfortunately, the President and his supporters in Congress are fighting this effort every step of the way. Although the President issued an executive order on January 19th of this year directing agencies to reevaluate the regulatory requirements that they impose to be sure they're tailored to impose the least burden, less prescriptive, and justified cost-benefit analysis, we have yet to see any regulatory relief from any agency. Speeches won't save America. Action will. The President can say he wants things done, and if nobody does them, we're in worse shape than we were before, not better shape. I had hoped that the entire administration would take this directive on looking at all the regulations seriously, particularly because regulatory burden falls most heavily on small businesses whose hiring will pull us out of this ongoing recession. Small businesses represent 99 7/10% of all employer firms. They employ over half of all private sector employees. They pay 44% of the U.S. total private payroll, and they generated 64% of the net new jobs in this country over the past 15 years. I owned and operated a small business, and I can tell you that if I had thousands of pages of regulations from health care law hanging over my head, I would hesitate before creating any new positions that increased my exposure. The key is to stay under 50. There's still regulation, less regulation under 50. Now, I know of some companies already that were at 52, 54, 56, and they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to reorganize so that we're under 50. I don't think that's a good idea. Although reorganization is always good, we should take a little dose of that here in the federal government. But we don't. Everything is based on what we had before plus inflation. No reinventing, no doing things differently. I'm seeing that in the post offices in Wyoming. They're trying to close down some of the small post offices without any new ideas for them, without even covering the costs. But that's another story, and I'll cover that later. As the senator from Tennessee said earlier, we're here and we're not getting anything done. Now, that's part of the strategy, I think. There wasn't any budget, 777 days with no budget, and bills left undone. We get to this process here where, to keep us from doing amendments on this side, we just keep the floor open like this for days, and then we have a cloture vote, and because we haven't had an opportunity to put any of our amendments in, we vote against the cloture vote, and that keeps the cloture from happening, and the leader pulls the bill down, and that ends the process. We go to another bill that we're also going to do the same thing on. Some of these are good ideas and ought to be passed, but we don't make it to that point, and I'm sure that's for the next election, saying so those darn Republicans just held everything up. Not how we ought to be operating. So, reducing the regulatory burden that's imposed by the federal government would be an important step, but we also need to make sure that the administration's independent boards and agencies get the message. So far, it's clear that they have not. An extraordinary effort is underway in the National Labor Relations Board to deter Boeing from expanding into a right-to-work state, where it would create work for over 1,000 employees. Those 1,000 employees have already rejected a union, but they have the right to do that. Now, this would be 1,000 more people employed and in a billion-dollar investment facility. But so what's happened in Washington State that might have the people there upset? Well, I'm not sure. They've hired 2,000 additional employees out there, so it obviously hasn't hurt the employment. There'll be 7 of the planes built in Washington State and 3 of them built in North Carolina. But the case has drawn a great deal of attention, not because Boeing is a big company, but because the agency's fact-twisting and publicity-seeking reveals a strongly biased agenda. Mr. President, our economy cannot recover when this administration's policies result in exporting jobs rather than airplanes. The wisdom of the National Labor Relations Act is to defend the right of employees to collectively bargain when they choose to do so, not stepping in to limit employees' ability to exercise their right not to form or join a union. At the National Mediation Board, we've seen rulemaking to change the way election results are counted in order to favor organized labor. When did that not work? Well, it didn't work in one instance, and the majority of the employees still voted against the union. The agency launched multiple investigations then, trying to smear the employer. These government-sponsored efforts to increase union density have done nothing to create jobs. In some cases, the federal government has been counterproductive to that goal and should get out of the way. Now, pending before the Senate and being held hostage under political pressure are 3 free trade agreements: South Korea, Colombia, and Panama. These pacts have been negotiated for years, and they'll open markets to our producers. Yet this administration is blocking them from passage and refusing to consider reasonable compromise. That's wrong, and it's hurting the economy and job growth. Korea alone would import $1 billion of U.S. beef, and that would also open the door with China, who has an even bigger population than Korea, and that's just one product. In the committee on which I now serve as ranking member, the majority has scheduled 3 hearings on the middle class and job growth. I'm concerned about the middle class. But the first one asked the question of whether the American dream is slipping out of reach. I made the point then that I'm repeating today. The American dream starts with a job. The focus on pay, benefits, and organizing does nothing to create a job. We're going to have another one of those hearings next week. I'm not sure where it's going. We haven't proposed any legislation yet. We're just getting press. Doesn't get jobs. And stalling the growth of domestic energy production industry or increasing the regulatory burden on American businesses doesn't increase jobs either. An unelected, unconfirmed general counsel at a small agency is getting in the way of a business management decision that does create jobs. And neither does blocking free trade agreements with our partners around the globe. The American dream is not out of reach, but it is suffering from needless hand-slapping threats. Those could be changed to hand-clapping progress. But this administration has to stop getting in the way of job creation so that Americans have jobs. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, last month the Medicare trustees warned that Medicare will go bankrupt in 13 years, which is 5 years earlier than they had previously calculated. You heard me right. One of the most important programs that the government actually runs, the Medicare program designed to provide health care to seniors, is going to run out of money in 13 years, 5 years earlier than projected just last year. Medicare trustees noted that Medicare's unfunded liabilities, that is the number that what it's responsible for, there's a $24 trillion shortfall, but that is also growing. So, stated another way, this is a $24 trillion gap between Medicare's future benefit costs and the future taxes and premiums that are expected to be collected to pay for it. Today, Mr. President, I am, along with nearly all of my Republican colleagues, sending a letter to the President of the United States insisting that he comply with the law. What law would that be? Well, the law that was passed in 2003 that under these circumstances requires the President to propose a plan to deal with this funding crisis for Medicare. President Obama has said he's willing to make some tough decisions, but yet he refuses to provide concrete and constructive and meaningful proposals to deal with this impending insolvency on one of our most important government programs. Medicare trustees have issued a Medicare funding warning in their annual report every year since 2006. They're required to do so under the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003. In response to this warning, as I said, the President is required by federal law to submit to Congress proposed legislation that would address this funding crisis. President Bush, in 2008, in response to the 2007 Medicare trustees' warning, did exactly what the law requires. He submitted legislation to address this funding crisis. Both the House and the Senate, in compliance with the law, introduced legislation, but unfortunately it never went anywhere, kicking the can down the road once again. The Medicare trustees have in fact issued a funding warning every year since 2006, as I mentioned a moment ago, including all 3 years that President Obama has been in office. However, for 3 years now, President Obama and his administration have failed to comply with the mandatory requirement of the law. Congress has never received a proposal from President Obama's administration to address this funding crisis. This failure, I wish I could tell you, was the result of an oversight, but apparently not. On Tuesday, an email to the Hill newspaper said on behalf of the administration that they believed that this law was, quote, advisory and not binding. Mr. President, the law itself states, passed by both houses of Congress, signed into law, the law of the land says the President, quote, shall submit legislation to Congress, not that he might, or if it's convenient, or if he finds time, or if it advances his political posture leading up to the next election. It says he shall submit legislation. Thank goodness we live in a country where no one is above the law. We are a nation of laws, where the law applies to the President of the United States and applies to among the most humble members of our society. But, Mr. President, Medicare is going bankrupt. Unfortunately, the voices of reform, people stepping forward to try to solve this problem, to make meaningful suggestions so we can actually do what we're supposed to do in Congress, which is to debate ideas and come up with solutions, where we can have a vote. We can send legislation to the President. He can sign it or not sign it. That's the way the process is designed to work. But so far, the voices missing from the reform debate are those of our friends on the other side of the aisle. There is no House Democrat plan to save Medicare. There is no Senate Democrat plan to save Medicare. There is no plan from President Obama to save Medicare. Unfortunately, their plan appears to be not to step up and to do what the law requires, to offer a proposal to save Medicare, but rather to try to take a cynical political advantage leading up to the next election by attacking the very people who are making constructive proposals. Now, no one suggests that any single proposal is perfect. The Ryan plan is not perfect. The Domenici-Rivlin plan offers a different approach. The President's own fiscal commission entitled Moment of Truth that reported back in December of 2010, a bipartisan commission appointed by the President himself makes constructive suggestions on how to solve our spending crisis and to address the unsustainability of our entitlement programs. But it appears that rather than embrace any of these constructive ideas, rather than do his duty as the law requires, that the President seems content to scare seniors into opposing responsible reforms while watching the program go bankrupt over the next few years. By refusing to propose needed reforms to this important program, President Obama is not only abdicating his responsibility to lead as the President of the United States, he's violating federal law. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that following my remarks, a copy of the letter I referred to in my remarks be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Thank the Chair, and I yield the floor.
President.
The senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, last night between 6 and 7 o'clock, I did a telephone town hall meeting back to Georgia. We had a little over 3,000 people on the call, and I was able to handle 16 questions. As I listened to the answers that I was giving to the questions, I was struck by what a real problem we have in Washington. Washington is making things worse. Georgians are frightened for their job, the value of their home, the education of their children. They're uncertain about everything, and as you give them answers about what's happening in Washington, you realize Washington is making it worse. And I want to give a couple of examples based on my experiences. First of all, let's talk about legislation for a second. You know, we have high unemployment, 9.1%, high unemployment. We have people without jobs or underemployed. And we have a law in the United States called the Workforce Investment Act, WIA. I'm on the subcommittee that oversees it, in the Education Committee. We've basically had an agreement on the expansion and the reauthorization for the Workforce Investment Act for months. But yet it languishes in committee because there are arguments over labor provisions that want to be added to it. Here we are with 9.1% unemployment, a nation that's in trouble, and we can't pass the Workforce Investment Act that's intended to help address the very problem that we have. Secondly, I'm on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee that does the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the fundamental foundation of training and improving our kids for the jobs of the 21st century. It's gone 4 years without reauthorization and languishes in committee today because of inattention or a lack of a willingness to bring it forward. So our children remain educated and taught and motivated under a law that's now been expired for almost 5 years. That's just not right. At a time we should be educating our children, at a time we should be training workers, we in Washington are doing nothing. On the Commerce Committee that I serve on, we're over the FAA Committee, the reauthorization of the Federal Aviation Administration, critical to economic development. That conference committee continues to languish. And what are the arguments about? More often than not about changes in labor laws. We need to get the job done in Washington, D.C. We need to go to work. We need to understand the American people are in trouble. They're hurting. And our job is to provide answers, not to make it worse. I want to talk about a second feature. I want to talk about regulation for just a second, or strangulation, if you will. I've told this story once on the floor. I want to tell it again. January 3rd this year, I was at the OK Cafe in Buckhead for breakfast to meet a couple of businessmen. I walked in the front door, and Steve Hennessy of Hennessy Cadillac Land Rover, a big automobile dealer in Atlanta, called my name out and went running across the restaurant floor. I thought he was going to give me a bear hug. Instead, he put his index finger on my chest. He said, "Johnny, yesterday I fired a salesman and hired 2 compliance officers. This financial re-regulation bill and the Dodd-Frank bill is strangling my productivity and raising my cost of doing business." And I think we do have to recognize that regulation has consequences. It is not our job to eliminate risk in the marketplace. It is our job to mitigate risk so people will take risk in terms of seeking reward, which is what the capitalistic system is based on. Talk about a few other regulations that are causing significant problems in our recovery. The qualified residential mortgage rule that's being promulgated now by the 6 regulators will, if it goes into effect on August the 1st, they've now put the effective date off, probably constrict the real estate market, which is already suppressed by 70%, by another 40%. Because it's basically going to take capital and risk capital and credit away from the very Americans who are, in fact, buying homes today. In fact, in order to mitigate risk and try and eliminate it, it requires lenders hold 5% risk retention until a loan matures. It says you can't loan anybody less than 80%, or more than 80%, and if you have anything more than 80%, you can't even have a private mortgage insurance policy to guarantee the money. So you're going to flood every buyer left to where? To FHA, which is exempt from the Dodd-Frank bill, or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are going out of business, which is going to mean you're shifting more and more of the burden of mortgage financing on people that are already overstressed. Regulatory intent should not do that. My farmers, my dairy farmers in Georgia are looking at a rule now where milk is being categorized as a hazardous substance, where it's going to have to be contained in tanks and reservoirs that now meet the standards of petroleum. Higher investment but with no additional profit from the company. That's protracted. Water. The EPA wants to take navigable out in front of the word water in terms of the Clean Water Act, so the government doesn't regulate just navigable waters, but it regulates every water. And credit. Credit is becoming non-existent from Main Street. I'm a small business guy. I was in small business in Georgia for 33 years. A lot of business people use their credit cards to manage their cash flow over time. Because of the credit bill that was passed a couple of years ago, they don't have the flexibility to do that anymore. Bank credit is suspended primarily because a lot of banks are, in fact, being run by the FDIC under cease and desist orders. Or if they're extending credit alone, they're only extending credit to the extent a borrower can put that much money in the bank. And when you constrict credit, you suppress small business. When you suppress small business, you suppress 72% of the employment in the United States of America. But now last, and I want to commend Senator Corker for his remarks about an hour ago on the floor, because he problem that we have, and that's debt and deficit. And it's kind of disappointing to me that we spent more time on the SBA Act, which has been pulled now, that was on the floor at the beginning of last month, than we spent on all the appropriations acts in the last 3 years of this Congress. We debated amendments, we protracted the debate, but nothing happened. We ought to be talking about debt reduction, deficit reduction, and a long-term plan over time to amortize the debt of this country to a reasonable level. We have a debt ceiling vote that's confronting us, and I've heard the political statements made by people in both parties where there's a game of chicken being played right now. Some saying we're going to push it right up till August the 2nd, force a vote. If we don't get it, we'll run the risk of America's credit going up in cost and uncertainty happening. Others saying we're not going to do anything on a debt ceiling increase period until we have to at the last minute. That's not the way to run a business. That's not the way to expand your credit. That's not the way to run a country. We ought to be sitting around the kitchen table of Washington, D.C. and the United States Senate reprioritizing the way we spend money to begin to rein in our expenditures, lower our deficit, and lower our debt. Mr. President, Madam President, I'll bet you every family in North Carolina, like every family in Georgia, has had in the last couple of years to sit around their kitchen table, reprioritize their expenditures. Things have changed. Their nest egg may have shrunk. Their equity may be suppressed. Their job may be in trouble. I've had to do it. Almost everybody in America. Why doesn't the American government do it? Why don't we, at a crisis moment of $14 trillion in debt with no ceiling above it, why don't we, with a deficit of $1.5 trillion, $300 billion more than discretionary spending, why aren't we sitting around that kitchen table? When I answered the questions last night on the teletown hall meeting, it became patently clear to me that Washington is making things worse. The American people want confidence that we will address the debt problem and the deficit problem and that we're working on it, not that we're putting it off to a drop-dead date and going to play chicken politics in the United States Senate. People they don't mind regulation that's fair, but they mind regulation that's suppressive and actually suppresses jobs. They don't mind having acts in Washington being debated on the floor one way or another, depending on your position, but to leave them to languish in committee and not even bring them up, that's just not right. So my challenge for me and for every member of the Senate, for this administration and for the President, it is time for us to lead. We have a clock that's winding down on a debt ceiling increase that's going to be important for this country. But without substantial reform of the way we do our business, without a game plan for a down payment on our debt and deficit, without an indication that we're going to work together and have shared sacrifice, then there's nothing at all that we can do in this government except cause things to be worse. And I don't want to be a part of that. My last comment is this. I was 39 years old in 1983. A report was put out by the Board of the Social Security Administration saying it was going broke in 2004. President Reagan and Tip O'Neill got together and said, we can't let that happen. President Reagan said, I don't want it to go broke, but I'm not going to raise the tax. Tip O'Neill said, I don't want it to go broke, but I'm not going to cut the benefit. And they went to the actuaries and they said, what do we do? The actuaries said, put out the eligibility. And so they changed the law and said, if you're an American born after 1943, you can't get Social Security at 65. You've got to wait till you're 66. I'm 66. They put my Social Security off a year. I didn't miss it. They also made Social Security actuarially sound until 2050. And only in the last 2 years has that date come down, and it's come down because of unemployed Americans at age 62 taking discounted early Social Security and putting more pressure on the system. We could fix Social Security tomorrow just like they did in 1983 and not take a penny away from anybody, but move the eligibility out to be more reflective of life expectancy. And I know Medicare is the big political football, and I know everybody would like to say, well, the Republicans are trying to kill Medicare, and the Democrats love to say we're trying to protect it. Heck, I want to protect it. I got 9 grandchildren. The rest of my life is about those grandchildren. I want to see to it they have a country as free, as productive, as safe, and the benefits there for them that have been there for me. It's important that we save Medicare, but we can't save it by looking the other way. We can't save it by taking it off the table. We can't demonize a Democrat or a Republican for making a constructive decision to save Medicare. Instead of trying to make it the political issue of the 2012 election, we ought to make it the personal issue of each United States Senator. Sit around that kitchen table, work together, and try and find a meaningful solution to a problem that saves Medicare for our future generations and also doesn't cause an escalation in our debt and our deficit. We are capable of doing it, but we have not demonstrated a will to do it. I challenge my colleagues to do the same thing. And I challenge my colleagues to do one other thing. Hold a telephone town hall sometime in the next couple of weeks. Talk to 3,500 of your citizens in your state. Listen to the questions that they're asking. They're scared, they're worried, and they're threatened. And Washington is making it worse. And I yield the floor, Madam President. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.